If you're wondering what the two titles I was mulling over for this video slot, it was a split between the first X-Men Legends and, well, what I ultimately went with. Something shorter, as I wasn't expecting Sonic Adventure 2 to be as lengthy as it was, and that only took me around 5 hours for recording. Legends is far longer, so it was a bit of a no-brainer, at least on my end. That, and a member of the Inner Circle has been big-upping how much I love Katamari Damacy for a while now, so it gave me a reason to check it out. And maybe I might give you guys the reason to look it up too. Bit of the Circle of Life motif going through this. Anywho, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share the video around, maybe hit up my Patreon to become a ticket holder to get your name in the credits, additional videos like thumbnail time-lapses and the Showtime Reels, the scripts in their entirety, and more. Or don't, I ain't your Uncle Ruckus who wasn't allowed to have fun as a child. I think it's a fairly obvious start for us to cover Keita Takahashi, since without him, we wouldn't have Katamari at all. Takahashi's rolling start over to Namco didn't actually begin with game development or gaming at all. His chosen career path upon entering university was sculpting. Not the easiest of courses to take as an artist, seeing as it requires an understanding of the material you are working with and how it reacts to physical effects so that you can mold and form it into its final shape. That, in and of itself, is already time-consuming, and that's simply half the battle. Newsflash, it's partly the reason why we don't have a ton of classical Greco-Roman statues anymore in the modern era, alongside artists just not getting the payment due to them. Rich folks don't spend their dollars anymore on commissioning someone like a Leonardo or Michelangelo to work on a singular project for 3 or more years. Art itself has become just as commercialized as other industries, to the point that you could have a full-on discussion of the depreciation of it. I know I put that actual art degree from the Wompty Dompty Dom Center somewhere. To connect Takahashi to this, during his time at Musashino Art University around the years of 1995 to 2000, there isn't an exact date, he kinda got a first-hand account of how art gets treated. From a New York Times interview with the man, we are given this. Takahashi, 48, never intended to become a game designer. He originally trained as a sculptor at Musashino Art University in Tokyo. However, the young artist became disillusioned as classmates disposed of their creations after each assignment. I realized that making art was not exactly useful, he said. This especially hurts because from a young age, Keita did have a fascination with art, spurred on by a trip to an art school when he was a child. In fact, when he was tasked by his professor to create a sculpture of a goat, he did that, but also added a twist to it. Why a basic statue instead of a flower pot that poured from the udders of the animal? It was a riot, getting the whole class to find enjoyment in the construction, planting the seed for Takahashi's big idea: make things that people enjoy. From Gama Sutra's Rolling the Dice, the risks and rewards of developing Katamari Damacy, Brandon Sheffield recounts Keita's mentality post-university. The world has many problems: pollution, war, oil shortages. How can anyone help with this through sculpture? He came upon the decision that he'd just like to make people happy. Though he feels as though this is a simple idea, he thought that if he could just make people smile, then maybe they wouldn't fight as much. Perhaps eventually this could even be a solution for racial misunderstanding and war. So he made a coffee table robot. He also made a tissue box cover shaped like a hippo. In Japanese, hippo is kaba, which is also the pronunciation for cover, so it became a kaba kaba. In his various sculptures, like a goat-shaped flower pot in which excess water is expelled through the udder, you can see that the humor of Katamari Damacy was pervasive throughout Keita Takahashi's creative career. Basically, why not have a little love in your heart? Heads up, as I've done this before, I am going to be paraphrasing from Bullseye with Jesse Thorne's episode with Keita, linked below, alongside the usual, as there is no transcript for me to reliably pull quotes from. Which is kind of funny, that whole thing about love, coming from a man that has gone on the record as saying he didn't have a lot of friends during his school years. Man, since the jokes keep on rolling, Keita didn't have anything to do with video games. Not when he was a child, he preferred to play outside. Not as a teenager, he was simply trying to survive, and not post-graduation. On pure whim did Takahashi interview with Namco. No experience in the field, just straight winging it, which is highly commendable, at least to me. What was the worst that could happen? You fail? Well, that did, at least according to the New York Times. Takahashi joined what was then Namco as an artist in 1999, despite being cut in an interview round with the company's executives. A colleague from the selection process persuaded the bosses to take a chance. That was how most of his career there went, by the skin of his teeth. Turn of the Millennium was an important time for the publisher-developer, hitting hard with both beloved arcade classics like Crisis Zone, Soul Calibur, and Tekken Tag Tournament, while fleshing out their console support with Pac-Man World 1 and Ace Combat 3, gearing up for the 6th generation with Dead to Rights, Tales of Symphonia, Baten Kaitos, and the Xenosaga trilogy. Busy as all get out. That didn't stop Takahashi, who, according to him from the Bullseye interview, just threw out the pitch of Katamari Damacy to his bosses. Okay, there's actually a little bit more to this, as it comes from the book Katamari Takes Shape, but I don't own a copy, so this will be a Cliff's Notes experience without quotes, sadly. Essentially, where the ball gets rolling is a cancelled game called Action Drive, Namco's response to Crazy Taxi, that Takahashi was an artist for. While the game didn't get off the ground, Keita did prototype out the designs for the likes of the King, Queen, and Prince of the Cosmos, as well as a basis for gameplay for this idea he was working out. Two more unfinished concepts would make the structure for Katamari Damacy in its finalized form. Of the two, Densen and Tamakuragashi, I would posit that the latter had the biggest impact on the gameplay. Back to Gamasutra, a lot of people have asked him what inspired the idea for the game, a question which he usually answers with nothing in particular. But during his talk, Takahashi revealed the answer. He went to the zoo and saw a mother panda rolling her babies around in balls. Actually, he clarified, that's a lie, I just thought of it. But in fact, there is a sport in Japanese elementary school competitions called undokai, called Tamakuragashi, in which small children roll a giant ball around, and indeed, that's the image featured on the cover of the pre-release Katamari Damacy demo from the Tokyo Game Show. The former, Densen, affected the art style more, putting into perspective how interesting the world can be with a change in one. However, to come back to the top, the problem stems from Keita being an artist, not a developer or designer. So while he did present the idea to Mitsutoshi Ozaki, his former boss, again, I don't have the book, so I too lack context, there wasn't anywhere to go. Yet, there was a workaround. Namco had just started its own development school in the same vein as Konami and Human Entertainment, so if Katamari Damacy was pushed through the school, it would absolutely have a chance. So off of his former boss's words, Keita did just that. In the article Singular Design of Katamari Damacy by Game Developer Magazine, we get these words from Takahashi. Luckily, I was able to build a prototype of the game before we started full development. I presented it to the company and the people who were interested in Katamari. I asked the ones who I thought were the coolest to join the team. This was the first time that everyone really came together and met. Katamari Damacy actually grew out of my senior thesis project for a Namco-sponsored university. Namco and Digital Hollywood, a digital art school, collaborated on this project. A prototype of Katamari was made as an exercise. Namco handled the game design, programming, and art direction. The students made all the in-game objects that the player could roll up. The purpose of this project was for the students to learn the overall flow of the game creation process. One of the bigger boons to the burgeoning team was that 3 members of Namco's arcade division were being laid off, allowing Team Katamari to snatch them right up and give a sense of merit to the project. Enough that, after a few foibles with developing the prototype, mainly to do with Sony's stodgy nature when handing out up-to-date development kits, that the whole game was worked on with a GameCube kit, so imagine that conversion, Namco greenlit the idea in 2001. As it wasn't positioned as a heavy hitter under the Namco brand, Katamari Damacy would have a shortened development time of a year and a half, with about 8 months dedicated to a finalized prototype. While I can't give out an exact budget when interviewed by GameSpy, Toru Iwatani, leader of Namco Research and Development around the time of Katamari's development, creator of Pac-Man and a member of the development team, had a guesstimate so as to not give out company secrets. Namco is a company that is known for its blockbuster games, Soul Calibur, Tekken, and Ridge Racer. According to Iwatani, these big games routinely cost $10 million to create. Katamari Damacy, he said, cost approximately 1/10 of what he would expect to spend on the bigger titles. Understandably, Iwatani would not be more specific. A 2003 showing at the GDC, Game Developers Conference, was met with intrigue and interest, especially since, like Shigesato Itoi's Mother series, Katamari Damacy was essentially an indie project made on a company's dime, to the point that while an American release was never scheduled, an old-style petition pushed it towards an American audience. Thank the International Game Developers Association for putting a spotlight on Katamari in America for their 2004 exhibition of the experimental gameplay workshop portion of GDC. While the game had a mild level of success in Japan, America ate this shit up. For a preface, a 2004 IGN article detailing Namco's Japanese sales expectations for Katamari were the following. Simple sells, and Namco knows it. Flying high on the success of its Taiko no Tatsujin series of drummer games, the company revealed that it expects sales of its upcoming Katamari Damacy game to perform at similar levels, with Japanese sales targets standing at 500,000 units. About 160,000 copies were sold by 2004's end. Meanwhile, in a market where the game wasn't expected to sell, America, nearly 120,000 copies were bought. This was name-dropped by Douglas Lowenstein in his State of the Industry address at E3 2005. Namco overvalued and undervalued Katamari Damacy, though it was a success leading to a sequel where I will make my stop. With a Japanese March release and American September release in 2004 on the PlayStation 2, and the re-releasing PC, Switch, and other modern consoles in 2018 and 2020, I decided to check out the original Katamari Damacy on the Star of the 6th Generation. Possible warts and all, kinda like Dementium on DS. I won't waste too much time here, as Katamari Damacy has the thinnest plot imaginable. The great king of all the cosmos, after a bit of frisky business, accidentally wiped out every star in existence. And our moon. To unbungle this catastrophic event, the king enlists his son, the prince of all the cosmos, to roll up many objects and things either indiscriminately or purposefully to recreate the missing celestial bodies. Meanwhile, a mom and her 2 kids go on vacation to see the dad launch into space and land on the moon. While they are making the trip, the son and daughter become aware of the king and prince, though the mother doesn't buy it until the dad can't complete his mission, and the whole family winds up getting stickied into the Katamari that creates the moon. They don't die, instead chilling out on Earth's satellite, inferring that the king and prince don't actually kill anyone to make Katamaris. What a benevolent apocalypse. Kidding aside, while the banter with the king is top-notch, going full hard into camp that he makes Dr. Frankenfurter proud, that is about the most you'll get here. Not that it's a bad thing. Insert the multiple times I brought up that games don't need a strong plot or plot at all to be a game. Katamari Damacy rolls on vibes alone, and that vibe is so confidently upbeat that you can't help but to join along. Feel good would be a tag next to wholesome. And DILF. Another instance on the show where instead of covering the graphics first, I'm going over the music. Makes sense, it greets you right when you boot up the game.
Katamari Damacy.
The acapella scatting and humming of the main Katamari theme is a prelude to aural joy, because as soon as you finish with setting up your save file, BAM! Katamari on the Rocks comes barreling towards your face alongside the opening cutscene, basically laying out what this game is going to be about. The spoken in English lyrics of "Don't worry, do your best" is the thesis statement for On the Rocks, as lyrically, it's a song about enjoying life to the fullest and finding joy in all the small things in it.
Don't worry, do your best. Picnic 기분 feels so good. 스테이키나 afternoon.
Broken up by one of the most earworm choruses I've heard, with the return of the scatting ending with Katamari Damacy. It's such a prominent theme, guaranteed to uplift your spirits purely by its whimsical nature, which becomes a running motif throughout the whole of the OST, alongside the mentioning of Katamari as an object in a number of the songs, and the na-nas making a reoccurrence in some of them. Despite differing compositions and even genres from the likes of J-pop to dance / electric to jazz, this is a feel-good soundtrack embodying the theme of the game in its own way. Look at Akitaka Toyama's You Are Smart. It couldn't be more on the nose even if it tried. The only lyric in the arcade-inspired, as it uses a number of classic Namco sound effects from the likes of Galaga and Pac-Man, slice of electronica is the repeated phrase of "You are smart." It becomes a mantra, nay a shibboleth that, well, you are smart. The song is going out of its way to compliment you repeatedly and not in a mocking tone, creating an almost positive feedback loop where you start agreeing with the track. Yeah, I am smart. This is what makes Katamari interesting on a dissection level, because even when a song is a part of the same genre, its composition can be wildly varied. Take for instance Wanda Wanda by Yu Miyake, the overall composer for Katamari Damacy. Phrasing there is because he isn't the only person with that role in the OST as seen with You Are Smart. Wanda Wanda is made up of the usual techno backbeat, but the overall, I guess, instrument is text-to-speech. Why I personally think the song is named as such is because the voice sounds like it's repeating the name Wanda as quickly as possible, blending into itself at certain intervals of the song. And to keep with the lightheartedness, the adjoining voice that makes up the chorus chants out Ichiban, which is Japanese for number one. While it is a bit of a stretch as it is a neutral word, maybe word number one. Like Smitty, Werber, Jaegerman, Jensen. On the side of jazz, you have the likes of K Sarah Sarah and Gin and Tonic and Red Red Roses sung by Lupin III's own Charlie Kosei, and Ado Mizumori and Asami Shimada, respectively. While both songs have the same general idea, Sarah and Jin mentioning creating stars in the sky via the Katamari, Charlie Kosei's smooth lounge singer inflection aims more for a love ballad akin to the Rat Pack's Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra, while Ado and Asami have a more playful vibe like a ragtime swing.
Into my life, let's roll up to be a single star in the sky. I hear you calling me. I wanna word you up into my life. Let's rock up to make a single star in the sky. To you.
Meanwhile, Katamari Mambo's duet by Nobue Matsubara and Sakamoto-chan, in between its comedic interludes basically poking fun at the idea of getting wrapped up in the joy of rolling around the balls, is another pretty earnest song about love, and not just in the emotional sense, as there's some heavy implication that Mambo, which the style of dance could be considered dirty dancing, for any of you moms or older women in the crowd, this ain't Roadhouse, is also about that physical lovemaking. One of the lines is, "I'm clinging to you," so it isn't hard to drift into that area. Still though, if Katamari on the Rocks wasn't the theme of Katamari Damacy, it would absolutely be the Lonely Rolling Star sung by Saki Kabata. I don't know a thing about J-pop at all. The closest I've ever gotten to the genre is probably a few video game and Kamen Rider Image songs. Not saying I dislike the style of music, I've just had limited exposure. This bubbly bop of longing and unrequited love has no right to be this enjoyable to listen to. It is, and I love this song almost as much as Katamari on the Rocks. What really ties the soundtrack together in a nice little bow is that even away from the context of the game, these are all still really good songs. The kinds I would burn onto a CD like the old man that I am so I could listen to them on my radio at any given moment. Reaching in the same bowl as a number of Sonic and Devil May Cry tracks if you catch the drift I'm sending you. But even if I'm glazing the shit out of the OST, the actual in-game sound effects are top-notch because Every item you pick up with your Katamari has a unique clip it will play. Different types of dogs and cats, children and adults, you name it, and it will have an audio effect different from the same type of object you picked up before. Like, the bike delinquents sound apart from the hippie guitar players who don't have the same vocalization as the school children, and so forth and so on. It helps you audibly tell what items you've picked up with your Katamari and gives them all a distinct personality. It's an underrated part of Damacy's presentation, because if everything sounded the same, it would make each object feel the same. Where would the fun be in that? I could roll one of those dollar store bouncy balls into a dusty house to get the same effect. But because everything you run over has a cry of its own, like a Pokemon, some objects stick with you, like the spiders and their weird crackling, the characters I've already mentioned, and the skyscrapers where people are actively freaking out over your acquisition of them. While I don't have as much to say about the graphics of Katamari compared to the music, they're still pretty pleasing to the eyes. A lot of Earth goes with a soft color palette, highlighting the plainness and mundanity of it all, while the King of the Cosmos and his family come in a variety of bright colors and hues. Same with the namesake of the game. Katamari's come in a few shades distinct to what level you're in. Taurus, for instance, has the ball be a black and white spotted pattern like a cow. What helps is that there is some meaningfulness in the graphics. The Katamari is the only round object in the game, while the Prince and King lack an angularness that every other item does. Look at the people, the dogs and cats, vehicles, and houses. They are all either boxy or made up of boxes. People's heads are literally just a cube. Even objects that would typically be round have more pronounced edges like balloons or oranges. It makes the more cosmic elements stand out, separating the king and prince away from humanity, while also highlighting the Katamari as something not of this world. It's a ball in a square world that effortlessly rolls around. Smooth would be a nice adjective to throw around, which is what I would say about the animations, though it is a bit harder to notice them since your attention is dead square on the Katamari. There's neat little details like how officers will try to shoot at the prince and his soon-to-be star, knocking over pets and people will always get a laugh out of me, and we do have a bit of squid action. It's just that most of the animation is simple for the sake of the gameplay. That said, Katamari Damacy is a delightfully looking and sounding game, a top-notch presentation. Katamari Damacy is a puzzle game? One of like 3 I've done for the channel, if you want to count Harvester alongside that number, though I would consider it a point-and-click adventure game in an entirely separate genre. Puzzles are an aspect, a massive one at that, but I wouldn't call them a traditional puzzle game. Kinda like Katamari Damacy. More on this in a bit. Katamari Damacy doesn't actually open up with a preamble or menu, instead taking you directly to the tutorial so you can learn how to roll properly. But while it might be on the fast track, I'ma slow it down to mention that Katamari Damacy is one of the least challenging games I've played on the whole, minus a few aggravating sections I'll cover in bad. Your uncle, Nana, strange cousin twice removed could easily pick this game up and beat it in the span of a day or 2. My recording session was 4 hours 30 minutes, and that wasn't full completion, so this won't take you long. Not that this is a bad or good thing, mind you. Game length is a mostly neutral element to me that can swing either way. But away from that, the most important part of your controls are the sticks, regardless of which input you decide to go with. As I emulated, I had PlayStation 2 controls, though I played using an Xbox controller, so most systems are universal. To move in Katamari, you have to point both left and right control sticks forward or backward to go, forward, backward. However, if you point the stick, say, left or right, you'll start going that way. This is fine for basic locomotion, but a Katamari can move in more ways than the Cardinals. If you hold one stick forward while shifting the other one in a different direction like left or right, the prince will shift his position on the ball to enable turning so you can more accurately steer the Katamari. For a few more advanced options, furiously and alternatingly pushing the sticks forwards and backwards lets you charge and shoot off at top speed, while clicking them in is quick turn, useful for avoiding a bump into a wall or other solid object, or picking up anything you may have rolled past. There is a jump off of R1, though it only allows the prince to get a bird's eye view, while L1 is first person in case you want to look at the world that way. Those are literally all the controls you need to know, because the name of the game, besides Katamari Damacy, God, what a lame joke, is picking up objects like a dung beetle to have the biggest ball of stuff and things imaginable. For a specification, the level layout of the game is slightly non-linear. Generally, you are given a few tracks, called stars, to play through without a given order, so you can tackle whichever one you want to do next. You'll always have to do Star 1, the first level, but after that you get access to Star 2 and Cancer and so forth and so on. You'll have to play all the stages and beat them to get to the end, but the order to do so is kinda up to your discretion. So you'll get access to Stars 3, 4, and a constellation that you can complete by your choosing, but you'll need to do all of them. So, what do we need to do in a stage? Besides constellations and other celestial bodies, the answer is get big. See in the top left corner your diameter? Whatever the king asks you to be, you must be that size before time runs out in the top right corner. To do that, you need to roll your Katamari into objects to sticky them to it, but it isn't that simple. Size does matter like Godzilla 98, because if you aren't big enough, you'll bounce off. Instead, the way that most of the stages go is that you need to gather things, and I really do mean that, as items in Katamari Damacy are a vast collection of random gubbins, that are smaller than your current size so you can build up to bigger objects, unlocking new areas that are size gated so you can repeat the process. That's it. It matters not how you collect things as long as you can grow in diameter to keep collecting things. That means avoiding objects that are larger than you lest you do what I said earlier, as well as dropping a few items from your Katamari. Same with bouncing into walls or level geometry, though depending on your size, you can scale ledges and the like by continuing to hold both sticks up. About the one thing of note when it comes to rolling is that living items like pets or people require you to stun them by crashing into them with the Katamari, allowing them to be picked up, which is where the quick turn has one of its uses. Of course, you still have to be the right size, otherwise you'll bump off them and lose items or brush into them, which does nothing. Katamari Damacy is one of the most self-evident games to be displayed for the channel, as what you need to do is intuitive. You have a size goal of 3 meters, roll shit until you get that diameter. Start with the smallest objects in the stage that the Katamari can grab onto, then build up from there. The game visually tells you when you reach a size checkpoint by a rippling effect and pulling the camera back. When that happens, try and see if you can grab some of the larger items you couldn't before. If you can, start adding those items to what you were collecting. If not, see if there are any other items that are affected or keep grabbing what you were. In fact, that is what makes the ranking system of this game easy to understand. While you can safely quit out of a traditional level once you reach the requested size, you can continue to roll for a better rank and to see how big your Katamari will get. Likewise, reaching the goal and I think half the allotted time you have turns the star shooting for additional accolades. The only time a spin is spun your way is for the constellations and bodies, which have a few modifiers from the regular stars. You either need to collect a certain amount of a set object, so for Cancer you have to collect crabs alongside other items so you can get crabs easier. Not the best way to word that. Collect one of a highlighted object, Taurus and Ursa Major will see us later, or reach a certain diameter without knowing what your current size is. North Star. Outside of those, any stage that is called Make Star X is under normal rules of Get Big. In fact, there aren't a lot of ways to fail in Katamari Damacy. If you don't reach your goal, that's a retry, but without any slap on the wrist. You will have to go through the level again, but levels are short enough that you aren't losing considerable time, and to fail is to not try at all. In between levels, you'll always be dumped off on the prince's home planet, allowing you to shift between single and multiplayer mode, save your game, examine any stars and constellations you made, choose the next stage, or, most importantly, customize the prince. In each stage is a present box containing a cosmetic item for the prince to wear. If you can find it, grab and hold onto it until the end of the level, you keep the cosmetic. The presents are well hidden enough, as I only found about 4, so if you want a true kleptomaniac experience, get searching. Definitely my favorite part about Katamari Damacy is how most level progression goes on. This is game-wide, so I do apologize if I don't highlight any set level or star. Basically, when you begin a stage in Katamari, you start off woefully tiny and are basically pushed around by anything that has a slight size advantage. A real 5'11 versus 6 foot situation. And trust me, you feel like a real man, woman, or them-led. Remember the bit in the Jimmy Neutron movie? The one where the Yokians were making fun of Jimmy during the finale for being so tiny, only for him to use the shrink ray to outsize them? That, in the lengthiest analog I could have given, is the best descriptor for Katamari Damacy. You get pushed around and bullied by anything that has a slight vertical reach on you. A domino becomes this imposing structure akin to an Imperial German stronghold. Bash your head against that wall all you want, it's still all one big fuck up. So you survey around and see what is tinier than the domino. Some loose snack foods, maybe some paper clips, among other associated trash items and pack rat belongings. So you go along your merry way grabbing loose change until you see that you have a noticeable size increase. You always know when you've reached a threshold because Katamari Damacy plays an effect that highlights any gate you've grown past. So you return back to the domino, silently standing in pure judgmental aura, and you roll it over, adding to your growing hoard. Okay, that means we can start snatching up other bones, erasers, and objects of similar make and model. The cycle then repeats. From far-flung game pieces and school supplies, you'll start crashing into fruits, vegetables, and household appliances like irons and remotes. However, unlike how we started off a stage with not a ton of options, once you get some weight and heft, you can start exploring around and seeing if there are any more slightly sizable objects to nab while you build up to rolling over the next set of larger items. You're always on the lookout for newly opened sections to blaze through, as while they might have their own subset of bigger things you can't sticky, undoubtedly there will be some free floaters ripe for the picking. Those books and journals are a tad smidgen resistant to the Katamari, but hey, there's a line of erasers right next to them, and what's more, pencils and pins that can now be added to our everlasting gobstopper because we've collected enough things. There were some where we were when we first were able to roll up dominoes, so let's head back, is what I would say if a tiny subsection didn't catch our eye that's filled to the brim with smaller tier items ready for rolling. That's a few magnets, cassette tapes, and garden ornaments for the mass. If we try to flatten the books now, nope, still not big enough, but we can add pencil holders, mouse traps, and heirlooms to the soon-to-be star, so let's go retrace our steps and see where most of those are. Oh, we're out of time. That's fine and good, we now know what to be on the lookout for when we reach certain thresholds, what areas we should go to next to start adding to the size quicker, and what this level's final objects are. Do all of what we did above, but on a faster schedule. Hey, we can start building our own library. Not only have we gotten better when it comes to understanding how the level is laid out, our ranking at the end is higher since we got more objects for the king, but also because we reached the stage's target size faster. What I've just described is Level 1, Star 1, but you can take this simple layout to almost any of the stages and it becomes applicable on a larger scale. Simply replace miscellaneous pocket treasures for pet animals, picket fences, and people. Dropping in further ahead in the game, Corona Borealis. While the name of the stage is to collect as many crowns as possible within the time limit as opposed to gobbling up everything with our big old ball of doom, we are still stringent to the regular rules. Oh, and our starting size is far larger than what we began with for Star 1. Our smallest items include children's toys and rotary telephones, and while we can collect some crowns right at the start, a number of them are being worn by dogs who we can't stagger, people who will push us away, and towers made up of lesser objects that'll balk at us like the domino from earlier. So we get to rolling. Run a few lines here and there, dogs and cats can now be scooped up, so if we see any that are wearing a marked item, they are free for the taking. These specific stages simply split your attention between objects that'll make you bigger and the highlighted objectives that you need a number of to make the best constellation. A monkey wrench hasn't been thrown into the mix as, on principle, you are doing the same thing you were doing for the other stars, you just have to be further observant of where crowns are. Getting big means you'll have an easier time pushing your weight around and slamming anything wearing a crown right into your trail mix assortment. Where once you would cower, dance around, or get pinballed by vehicles or worry about crashing straight into people and lose some of your spoils, you can now freely get one up on them. I will say that I do think the later levels showcase the size difference the best, but that's solely on the factor that when you first begin, the biggest thing you'll get is being able to take pets and people. When it comes to Star 9 or the Moon, guess that's how I'm gonna relate this to SA2 seeing as someone needs to fix it, you'll start off so piddly, but end up running over trees, buildings, and in the case of Moon, islands and weather formations. You get such an in-depth view of where you start and where you end across a majority of the stages. Where you would once struggle to pick up a set of books, you're upending whole entire city blocks, and generally being an upbeat menace to society. Where people would chase you off or use you like a soccer ball, you run them down like a bowling ball. The sky is literally the limit, as even clouds are not safe from your due diligence to the king. The only way you can be stopped is when you actually hit the stage's limit signified by the circling angels. Why I don't have a quote-unquote favorite level is that this through line is consistent through all the stages. Start small, end big is the simplest way to display progression, and it feels like Katamari Damacy nails that right on the head when you get to the size of a skyscraper. Even when you're punished in a level for bumping into stuff, you don't die or lose time, but objects, making you smaller. Katamari Damacy is simplistic, but in that simplicity does the game shine. People like it when numbers go up, so what if we took that idea and applied it to a rolling stone gathering moss? How big will this get? What will be there to stop it? Outside of times where you'll pinball around and lose absolute control in a number of stages, which is more of a hilarious annoyance when you're trying to get on with your rolling, the worst of the constellations to make are Taurus and Ursa Major. Katamari Damacy rolls on when you don't have to accurately pick up objects or avoid hazards. Like a stone, not only do you gather moss, but lack the capacity for pinpoint movements. This isn't much of a problem for a majority of Damacy. It keeps to the feel-good, go-with-the-flow vibe that the title has, but when the game decides to step away from that mentality, do problems arise. It is a take-your-pick for Taurus and Major, as both have the same modifier, so it matters little which one is actually harder. They both suffer the same fault. Unlike how for a good number of stages where you want to snatch up everything, or the few where you need a specific subset of items, or the one where your size is hidden from you, Taurus and Major require you to pick up one item to finish the stage. A cow for the bull, and a bear for the bear. Sounds simple, and it is. The catch is that any facsimile of the animals counts as the one, and based on the size of said item, you are rated. The bigger the better, so you better not accidentally grab a smaller marked object and prematurely end your run with a low rank and a scolding from the King of the Cosmos. Whole swaths of the two courses are littered with trinkets where the admittedly floaty controls work against you. The controls themselves aren't too much of a sore spot, though they do take some time to getting used to, and aren't what I would call precise. Rolling in a straight line is easy enough, but having to turn, slalom, or anything that requires more dexterous efforts will lead to some issues. Usually by getting stuck, the aforementioned bouncing around, or feeling like you aren't in control of the giant ball of hoarding. This is where my ancient lizard brain fails me, as turning never felt intuitive to me. I don't know if it's my lack of time with titles that are in the flight sim genre, so up is down, down is up, mad world logic, or if I just can't wrap my mind around the idea of pointing one stick in a different angle while holding one straight to turn left or right. But you can see the times where I'd want to turn but make the wrong choice. That said, the controls do get the job done, which for the majority of Katamari is all you need. That's another reason why Taurus and Major suck in general. They test the controls in a way that seems ill-fit for what is asked of the player. Or average player in this example. You have to play miserly and slow, the exact opposite of what Katamari is all about, since stopping on a dime is an impossibility. This is for a best case scenario, as if you are under your own momentum, braking still takes some time for the prince to pull off, as it isn't a handbrake but a reverse. Good luck if you're barreling towards a cow or bear. If you can tell that the item is a marked one in the first place. That's a separate section of this equation, as while you can tell that a bull or a cow or a bear is obviously included in your checklist, if it's a depiction of the animal, it also counts. Cow on a milk carton, a wooden carving of a bear, a sign with a bull on it, those are all considered highlighted and come in a variety of sizes. Suddenly your circumference becomes a big problem, because if any of those items mentioned above are smaller than you run the risk of running them over and disappointing Space Dad. Again though, this is looking at the situation in an extremely favorable light. You still have to avoid bumping into larger, faster moving objects at certain sizes, lest they send you flying. Because when, not if, when something collides into you forcing a bounce, have fun trying to avoid an accidental run end. Back to the braking equation, as this plays a massive part, this is the usual situation you'll find yourself in, making the braking useless. It seems like you can't stop if you aren't under your own momentum, making any kind of pinballing that more dangerous and strenuous to your psyche. This includes gravity as well, so if you tumble over an edge, you aren't stopping. But that is merely one of a few ways you can fail Taurus and Major, as generally playing Katamari Damacy the way that you should, you'll find yourself under the wrath of the king. Size matters, as if you can't see where you're going, you can accidentally collect a marked object. The layout of these stages are purposely designed to have you deal with these problems as well, like an inverse of the grab specific item stages, where a majority of what is in the level are the specified object, but instead of donning the hat of a kleptomaniac, you have to weave around like you're dodging rain. You have to play slowly, but since the clock is counting down like it does in any stage not named North Star, you run into the opposite problem of playing too cautiously. There is a unique highlight in both Taurus and Ursa that isn't all clear, the Holy Cow and Kentaro Bear, but to get them you have to have a noticeable Girth feeding back into the problem synonymous with both levels. Can't get too big, otherwise you'll nab a smaller cow or bear, Can't be too small, otherwise pinballing will lead to a fail. Can't go too fast, otherwise you'll ram into something you don't want. Can't go too slow, otherwise you'll be timed out. You know it's bad that North Star, a stage that requires math to do, a subject I am famously awful with, is far easier to complete with a passing grade rather than either of Taurus or Ursa Major. Once you know that you can pick up regular sized trees at around 10 meters, that is how you complete North Star. Getting the exact number is still a bit of a bastard. You have to tree count, which leads to overshooting and undershooting, forcing a restart, which is its own cycle of hurting. But that's better than playing in the minefield of Taurus and Major. 3 out of 22 ain't bad, as there isn't much for me to complain about here. If you're wondering what the third is, Cygnus, solely because it requires memorization of which eggs are geese, and you have to tackle certain areas first to nab the eggs before you squeeze yourself out of the smaller crevices. Like how in Cancer you have to gobble up the crabs in the starting location, otherwise you won't be able to later since your Katamari won't fit under the floorboards. That makes the starting area for the goose extremely critical to your success as it contains a number of eggs, but you have to be wary of falling off or exiting areas in the tower too early. It's a variation of the problem of Taurus and Ursa Major, where you have to play slowly to avoid going down to the lower parts of the house, but not too glacial as you lack a decent time window. Stray bumps can lead to a long drop and sudden stop where you now have to figure out how to get back up to where you were pushed off, and at that point you are better off restarting. Cygnus's stringency to that layout can lead to a reset, but once you know, you know. Katamari Damacy is a delightful little game that I wish I played earlier. It has some of my favorite level progression I've seen in a video game. The soundtrack carries its weight and then some with catchy bop after next, and because of how laid back in nature Katamari is, it has an almost stress ball-like quality since it barely demands anything from you. The few faults in the game are when it steps away from that, but it is extremely easy to overlook when it sits in the minority. While I covered the PlayStation 2 version, Reroll is widely available on whatever system you prefer. There's actually more than one book written about Katamari Damacy. In my research, I found 2. Oh, and a US patent listing among some of the other information that didn't wind up in history. There's many layers to the game and the background behind it, just like the Katamari you roll up can have a collection of school children taking up space next to a vast array of fish. Which leads to the weirdness of how Namco continued the series without Keita post We Love Katamari. That's a story for another time, though it does suck in that usual way of how companies essentially own ideas instead of the creators and brainchildren. Getting flashbacks to Spyro, Crash, and Disco Elysium and not the fun ones. Anywho, this show is made possible with the likes of the moviegoers within the Peanut Gallery and Inner Circle. Consider buying a ticket at patreon.com/Let's Talk About Games, no apostrophe in the Let's, for behind the scenes access to LTA scripts, thumbnails, other bonus material, your name in the credits, and early screenings of episodes, plus the live commentary Showtime Reels where I ramble my way through games gone by. As said at the top, like, comment, subscribe, share, become a ticket holder or don't, I ain't your Uncle Ruckus. And as always, this showing of Katamari Damacy is over, but stay tuned for our next feature. Treyarch's follow-up to Spider-Man 2, Ultimate Spider-Man.